Delighted to be here on the last panel of the day with my delightful panel that we have in front of you. So what I was going to do first is just get them to introduce themselves and give a bit of context in terms of what this topic means to them in their everyday. Just by way of brief introduction on myself, so Lynda, I'm part of the board for the British Fashion Council. And sustainability is something that I've been passionate about for many years. There's a few familiar faces out in the audience. So on we go. So over to you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. As you said, Marcus, I am Regional Head of Sustainability and Public Affairs for H&M North Europe. So I will definitely have the longest title of anyone on stage.
Brilliant. And over to Jodie.
Hi, I'm Jodie Leek. I'm Head of ESG for Partner Brands at ASOS. Within my role, I look after all topics of ESG, engaging with over 800 partners on human rights, environmental impact, chemical compliance and animal welfare.
Hi, and my name's Nikita. I'm a sustainability consultant. I work with a lot of a broad spectrum of companies, from small startups, and help them penetrate the market through sustainability, as well as working with big corporations such as Avery Dennison.
Fantastic. So we're going to get straight into it with, frankly, our first maybe slightly controversial question. So all your businesses work globally. What do you see as the current areas of friction or challenges associated with not having a clear position from the UK in terms of regulation?
You want me to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. No, I mean, I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity, actually, because there's a lot of things happening right now. We know on the European Union level, a lot of things being discussed back and forth currently. So there's an opportunity here to have some sort of time to actually make sure that any legislation that's coming or being discussed in the UK can actually be aligned to whatever is happening in the European Union. To all due respect to the UK, but the European Union is a bit larger and have more markets. So if they could align, that would be great. But with that said, harmonization is only one part of legislation. It also needs to be sort of predictable and clear. And also it needs to create a level playing field between different kinds of businesses, both from size perspective, but also different business models. So all these three things needs to be in place: harmonization, level playing field, and predictability. And if you get that in place, we're all good.
Yes, I think we might come back to level playing field a little bit later. Jodie, what's your sense on this topic?
It's interesting because as a brand and a retailer, I like to lean into the retailer perspective. We operate in 190 territories worldwide. We work with 800 partners who are every stage of this journey and business size and level. So we work with SMEs and micro brands and vintage wholesalers right the way through to multi-billion pound conglomerates. So we get a very representative view of the challenges that not only we as ASOS might be incurring, facing into legislative change, but also we get a very well-represented view of what UK-centric businesses might be experiencing when we, as a brand that are placing products on the European market, are looking at how we can be compliant and the data and the disclosure and the due diligence that we need to obtain and work with to be able to continue to operate. It is our license to operate, but we're working with partners who might not have to meet those requirements currently themselves. So we're always trying to strike a balance between the information that we need, but also taking a proportionate and appropriate approach so that we don't overwhelm our partners, but still being able to manage those impacts and those significant risks.
And just as a brief follow-up just to that, would you have to just bring to life a couple of challenges that some of your partners have as a result of that, particularly some of the smaller brands maybe that you have working with you?
Yes, I think we've had some really good examples in the last couple of years where actually we've had regulation that has been implemented. So, for example, some of the French regulation that we're working with now and transparency requirements have required us to go out to smaller business partners or UK-centric business partners to ask for data that they might not have been collecting themselves. So obviously that is looking in the short term actually how do we approach that conversation? How do we support those partners in understanding what our requirements mean to them? And actually, what do we need to put in place to be able to really potentialise that opportunity and continue that economic opportunity with those brands? So there's a lot of collaboration. It very much is understanding what our business model needs to look like as well as theirs, and seeing how we sort of can fit this together so that we can move forward and drive progress at the same time.
Thanks, Jodie. And for a slightly different take on it, Nikita, given obviously the work you've done with Avery Dennison, what's your view on how that sort of friction manifests itself?
I think the friction is really in the uncertainty at the moment. So, like for UK companies, like, is the UK aligning with the EU? Is it not? And I believe the UK will align, and I hope they do align to make it easier. But I think especially the smaller companies where they're trying to figure out and understand all the ins and outs of the regulations, and do they need to spend energy on this now, or is it not going to be implemented or not? So I think that's the sort of friction and the sort of the complexities that we're dealing with here, which is a lot harder for the smaller companies. With the bigger companies, you've got a whole team behind it helping support as well.
Great, and if we go on kind of where we're going to go next, which is in terms of if there may be policy makers or people that inform policy out there in the audience. I won't ask you to put your hands up if you are in that particular boat. But if you were going to try and give some messages back to those policy makers to say what you would like the UK to do at this point in time around policy, what would you say to them?
I would just say to maybe bow down and mirror exactly what the EU are doing to make everyone's life easier. I think that would be the best thing to do, and make everything seamless, and let companies work between UK who are thinking about expanding into the EU already be prepared, and vice versa. So yeah. And I don't think do anything different. Like I wouldn't like change it and make the UK even more stringent, because it's going to make it harder for EU companies coming to do business here, and vice versa. So, yeah.
And move you through the rest of our panel. So,
I'd echo some of those thoughts in that harmonisation really is critical. Understanding that actually going further than some of those existing regulations will actually be, really sort of being a sort of blocker for UK businesses in operating in EU markets. But equally, we don't want to go water down too far. This should be about levelling up those who are doing less than it's expected now, not about levelling down the requirements.
And I think this kind of level playing field point, I think, will keep coming up. Marcus, what was your view on this as a very large business?
I'm just trying not to make this into like we all agree, and it's just one thing
to
talk about. I'm trying to think how can I go off script here a bit. But jokes aside, I think of course, I echo what they're saying, but one thing to think about this is that we actually need to focus, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to solve a problem, and the problem looks the same wherever you go. It's not, there's, on the sustainability side, on the fashion, the retail side, the problem is basically the same in all markets. So it doesn't make any sense to try to make up different solutions for different markets. It just doesn't make any sense. It makes it harder for us. So if we harmonize, it will make it easier for the businesses. But the nice part of that, it will probably also make it easier for the policymakers, because they don't have to reinvent everything in every market. They can actually, if they start looking around, they'll see there's some really good examples out there. EU is one, but of course others as well there might be. But so let's make it easy not only for the businesses but also for the policymakers. I mean, I know they're struggling as well, as we are.
Thank you. And if we kind of look into the future, like we don't really necessarily know how some landscapes might be changing in the world of regulation, based on things obviously happening more holistically in the world. You guys have obviously all been part of setting out a kind of strong narrative and making and significant investment associated with furthering your sustainability programs and the landscape in terms of how you kind of talk to your customers. What's your view in terms of how things are looking like they might evolve, and the fact of obviously your investments relative to others who may not have chosen to do quite so much quite so early?
I don't mind taking this one
Go
first.
ahead, you start and I'll jump in.
We adopted FWI as the cornerstone of how we operate at ASOS before legislation was even a mandatory conversation at that stage. It was voluntary. We understood that it wasn't optional. Sustainability isn't a choice in our eyes. And to develop our framework, which we need to keep adaptable. It will need to evolve as our business changes, as the landscape evolves. We look to all the wealth of guidance that was available to us, and that's still available now. So actually, I think in the way that we engage our partners on that journey is, like I say, understand your own business model. You've got to understand your business model. You need to understand the potential impacts that you might be contributing to within that business model. And then you need to have a plan in place for how you're going to try and prevent those impacts, avoid them, or reduce them and remediate them. And I think if you can do that first, and then understand the expectations of your stakeholders, and make sure that you've got a framework in place that aligns with all of the guidance that's out there, because it's been in place for over 40 years now. That hasn't changed. So to Marcus's point, those risks and impacts are widely documented, and there's a huge network, this is one of them, that you can lean into your peers. You know, actually, I said earlier to a few people, if you'd have said to me 25 years ago when I was a buyer that I would be on stage talking about legislation, actually with my peers, my business partners, some of my competitors, I'd have probably laughed. I would never have thought it possible. I'm delighted it's happening. But that's the key to success. So we shouldn't be overcomplicating this. It's a really complex topic that we're at risk of making more complex if we just shroud it in, inaccessible terminology. We need to bring it back to basics, understand what we're trying to achieve, and make sure that we're putting planet and people and impact management at the heart of that.
Yeah, I'm going to move in shortly into the sort of self-congratulatory part of my messaging today.
You can have that moment, it's fine.
No, but I mean, from H&M's perspective, we've been working with sustainability for about 30 years. We started doing sustainability reporting over, I think it was 21 years ago, way before it was even close to mandatory. No one understood what we were doing. It was a CSR report. It looked horrendous. If you're a graphic designer, you would probably be sick when you see it. But still, it was there. And we started doing it and we evolved. And next week, we will release our then 22nd or 21st. And then it's a fully integrated annual and sustainability report with a sustainability progress report attached to that. And we do believe that it's actually already compliant almost fully with the CSRD directive. So we invested a lot into this. And we also, we work very closely with our suppliers. We don't own any factories. We work very closely with our suppliers. In 15 of the production markets, we have production offices with people on the ground, sustainability people working with them, doing sort of energy efficiency assessments, supporting and finding finance to decarbonize, and to find renewable energy. We're working very, very hard on this. And what we're seeing now with this sort of uncertainty around legislation, what's happening, what's not happening, is that we need to spend more time on compliance and understanding that we can do on actual action. And I think that's, we can still balance it out a bit because we are, you can have issues with our size, but with our size comes also the possibility to do more, and both do reporting and action. But if you look at the smaller and medium-sized businesses, this uncertainty creates a need to focus on compliance when you should be focusing on action and trying to actually change things. So so I think the main thing that we need to get policymakers and governments to focus on is actually to move into a situation where it's a bit more predictable, not just to go back and forth, not just put something out there and then draw it back and then maybe change it a bit on the way. And some legislation has not even been implemented and already changing it. So we need this predictability, and I think that's the most important part. And then harmonization and level playing field and all the other things, of course.
Yes, and I think this sense, given obviously both from an ASOS and H&M perspective, you've been around this topic for obviously many years, as you've both have set out, and this idea about the level playing field to enable you to almost differentiate and demonstrate how much you've invested in moving the dial for your respective businesses. One of the things that can be an enabler in this is obviously technology. Nikita, I know you spent a lot of time with Avery Dennison and others looking at how you support and enable that transparency so that you create that level playing field. So what's your sense in terms of where we are right now?
Well, I think, yes, it's super important legislation, let's say, to have that level playing field, and I feel there will always be companies trying to go for profit unless that legislation comes in and creates that level playing field. But, you know, with companies like Avery Dennison, for example, bringing in that technology where you can have a DPP which can help trace, you know, the product and tell all the information from source and show the transparency, I think super important. And I think what's going to be a game changer potentially in the industry as well is probably having like RFID, life of garment, where an RFID tag can be, you know, put on at manufacturing point, and when it comes to end of life, when we're talking about recycling, circularity, and when it comes to sortation, which is one of the trickiest things, having a life of garment RFID in there, which can sort of bucket different materials, I think super important. So I think, yeah, if you're looking at the whole entire life cycle, I think that's super important. But was that answering your question?
It does, but I think so yes, and I think if we were going to kind of think forward around what we're wanting those kind of technology platforms and products to have into the future in terms of on their roadmap to help enable and fix some of those points of friction or challenges within the business right now, where would you go? I
think interoperability, which is a new term that we're sort of utilising because that really is what this is about, is absolutely critical. It's understanding that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Bringing it back to, you know, we're at lots of different business models. We have our own requirements. Making sure this the tools and the systems are accessible. So actually they're not only accessible to you if you have that financial capacity to use them, and making sure that the data lake and the data community that we're creating can exchange data with each other, because we've got a standardization and a common language. And I think that even itself, that's a sort of still currently a barrier. We're sort of referring to data and metrics in slightly different ways sometimes within businesses. So standardization is really important. Actually, the engagement that we have with our business partners is also driving that. So we're not wholly reliant on legislators to tell us. A lot of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years as ASOS, working with our peers, where we know that we have shared partnerships, we know that we need to be undertaking due diligence with those partners, but we also know that we're going out and asking the same question, possibly in 15 different ways, is not helpful. So I think short term, let's look at those sort of, unfortunately, manual interventions that we're using and try and simplify what we're doing there, make it more accessible, make it easier to use, make sure that those smaller businesses can get involved. At the same time, working with the solution providers to make sure that by the time we have standardized metrics, that those systems integrate, and then we're going to reduce that administrative burden so we can put our focus back on managing those impacts and investing our time in that way, as opposed to continually investing in administrative requirements.
Yeah. I'm sure, and actually given the marketplace nature of aspects of your business, that becomes, I think, even more complex for you. Absolutely. And wanting to have that system and the platform that enables that. Slightly different, I think, for you, given the global nature and the sheer scale from an H&M perspective. You know, what would be on your wish list in terms of product roadmaps and evolution in the sustainability space?
How much time do we got? But going back a bit to the technology side, and there's a lot of things. I mean, you tend to focus on different things, and technology is one now, and the DPP and the data collection and the sharing of data, and it's all valid, and it's all needed. But I think we're always, we need to approach this holistically and say that that's one part of it. But then we need, like, what do we do with the data? And how do we act upon the data? Going back to what I said before, we need to keep one foot in the action part. And we've had that. Historically, we've said, let's just try stuff. We're going to make mistakes. We have made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But we need to try stuff. We need to do it, because if we do that, then we can develop, and then we can change, and we can see what's working and what's not. Data is a big part of that. That's not going to solve it. Data is not going to solve anything. And that's a little bit back to the reporting side as well. That's not going to solve it. It's going to be, you can report and be super compliant, and it says we're shit. And I say, oh yeah, but you're compliant, great. But we need to move away from that also and bring in the action side, not lose that, because I think that's what that's a bit of the sort of trends you're seeing. So if the number one thing on my wish list is to slightly move back a bit into the action and try stuff, and because I think that's one thing that is been a bit sort of over the last few years, that it's been because you try stuff and it's a mistake, and then you get hit really hard, especially if you're a big brand. I'm going to whine a bit for being a big brand, sorry, but we need to dare to be there as well and try stuff as well. Data can help that, and if we can find standardized ways, we always tell the politicians, harmonize, standardize, and we can probably do a bit of homework ourselves.
I think that's one of the trickiest things, is how we're going to aggregate all that data from all those different sources, whether it be a textile genesis, whether it be a trust trace, whether it be all these different people gathering all these data points. How do we amalgamate it into a unified thing that our factories understand it, that the brands understand it, and all the different, let's say, consumers, understand it as well. So I think that's one of the important, points, is amalgamating all that data to make it unified. But everyone's got a different opinion. Every brand says they want to do it their way. Every brand thinks they can do it better. Every small company, so it's trying to figure out that unified.
I think it's also remembering why we're collecting the data. Like I say, it's got to be meaningful. We need to be collecting data that we're going to use, but also that ultimately the ambition of these systems, these platforms, is transparency, because actually if you have transparency, you're sharing it once. You're sharing it well, and you're sharing it with everybody. So actually, transparency for us is really important. The brands that we work with who are most transparent, we have to have less engagement with, because they're telling us before we've asked for it. So I think transparency is a really important thing to consider. Where legislation will be helpful to that is it will mandate transparency, and over time the fear of transparency will hopefully reduce. Whereas at the moment I think there's still a reservation around being transparent and how that data is going to be used. It's a bit of a barrier still, that fear.
Okay, so I think we've got time for just one more question. So just almost in terms of potentially thinking into the future again, as the affordability of climate-related goals might be being debated in some boardrooms in terms of commitments to their agenda, what would your message be, given all your businesses are very committed on this subject? What would your message be if you were in those boardrooms?
I think I don't really recognize that kind of discussion from our business, to be honest. I think that we see sustainability and business success as two things that are integrated together. But I of course realize that might not be the case for everyone. But again, I think we need to see it as that. This is going to happen because, again, there are issues and problems and things happening all over that we need to solve. And if we can't do that, then it doesn't really matter what kind of business you have, because then we won't be around for another maybe 50, 70, 100 years. So if you want longevity in your business, you should focus on sustainability and see that that's part of your business success.
Yeah, and likewise, we don't see this at ASOS as optional. Actually, we see it as an opportunity. It drives our business resilience. And when we're engaging with partners that might not be there yet, that's the message that we try to convey to them. But also it can be incredibly overwhelming at the moment. It is highly complex. You feel like you might need a degree in law to be able to navigate this emerging world, but try to sort of just bring it back to the basics, understand what this means to your business, and make a start. I think somebody said earlier, the biggest risk is doing nothing, and we echo that.
Thank you. And Nikita?
I'm totally against kicking the can down the road and letting someone else deal with it later on. So always, if I when I worked at Parley for the Ocean, so we took recycled ocean plastic and made over 100 million pairs of trainers of Adidas out of it. It was about future-proofing the business. There was no legislations back there with Adidas, but they were like, how do we future-proof our business for when the legislation comes in? So if you're future-proofing your business now and building these requirements, regardless of legislation, you're going to be in a lot better position to thrive when the legislation comes in. So that's the key point from me.
Thank you. We'll say thank you to the panelists for this first section.